All right, so before we start picking up with where we left off in lesson 3, I need you guys to log into WeScheme first. So wescheme.com or wescheme.org, sorry. And then you're going to click start a new program. And what we're going to do is type the following into our interactions window. Evaluate each and circle whether the output is a number, string, or image. If you receive an error, you need to find your error and fix it. The most common mistake at this point is probably missing a parenthesis at the beginning and the end. If you have one open parenthesis on your expression, then you should have one closing parenthesis. If you have two open parentheses, then you should have two closing parentheses. So just keep that in mind. Your cursor must also be at the end of the line before you hit enter. Okay? So take a second, type these in, and then you're going to say number, string, or image. Okay? All right, letter A, 16 times 4 gives us 64, and this is a number. Letter B, we're adding 21 divided by 7 and 8. So that gives us 11, which is also a number. C, we're dividing 7 plus 2 and 3, which should have given you 3, which is also a number. Okay, letter D, hopefully we recognized from the last lesson, that is the star function. So that gives us a star, which is an image. Same thing for E, star function. So we get a star, which is an image. Okay, letter F, we type all that stuff in, we get 7, number. And then letter G, I have things in quotation marks, which we know gives us the exact same thing, which is a string because of the quotes. Okay? All right. So below you will find 2 examples of functions that we have learned how to write in code. So far we've talked about functions, add, subtract, multiply, divide, and the star function. So those are the 2 functions that we've learned so far. Notice that different functions take in different types of inputs, and we need a way to keep track of the requirements for each function. This is where the contracts come into play, okay? And then if we remember our notes going back to the beginning of this lesson, we said how contracts have 3 parts. The first one is the name of the function. The second one is the domain of the function. And the third is the range. So there's 3 things a function needs: the name, what the inputs are, and then what the output should be. Okay? The domain of a function is the type of data the function expects. And again, these are the inputs. So these can be anything from numbers to strings to multiple numbers to multiple strings. So for example, the star function, excuse me, needed a number that told us the size, and needed a string, which told us whether it was an outline of a star or a solid star, and then another string for the color. So our star function used 50 solid red. That was the original star function. So the size was 50, it was a solid star, and it was red. Okay? The range of a function is the type of data the function produces. That's the output. So the star function produces an image, right? It physically gave you a star. It didn't tell you a number or a string anymore. It just gave you the image. So the full contract for the star function looks like this. It's kind of interesting, confusing, lots of symbols going on here. So first thing we notice is that it begins with a semicolon. Next is the name of the function. Then we have a colon. After the colon goes the domain of the function, so all of the inputs. So the star function used a number and two strings. Then we have an arrow, which is used by a hyphen and a greater than, because remember, we have to type this in a computer. And then our range, or the output, is an image. So we use types for the domain and range instead of specific values when we write a contract, because we want a contract to be a general description of how a certain function works. So you notice how we didn't write 50 outline rec. It's number string string, because I want this to be generic so that it follows every single star function we could create. Okay? So in number 22 here, we're going to write contracts for the following functions. So the first one I have done for you. So we start our contract with the semicolon. Second thing is the name of the function. So here our name is addition, so the plus sign. After the name comes a colon. Then we write the domain, what the function is expecting as the input. So if you think, if I'm doing an addition problem, at a minimum, I need two numbers. I could have more than that, but I need at least two numbers. Okay? Then we do our arrow, and this function produces another number. Okay? So if we're writing the contract for multiplication, we're going to start with a semicolon. Multiplication is the name, colon. Just like addition, I need two numbers, number, arrow, and I get a number out. Okay? Subtraction and division are going to be similar as well. The only thing that's changing is the name. So for subtraction, my name is minus, colon, number, arrow, number. Okay? Division, same thing. Semicolon, divide, colon, number, arrow, number. Okay, now SQRT, that is square root. So when we're thinking the square root, for example, the square root of 25 equals 5. So if we're thinking about this, when I take a square root of something, how many inputs do I need? Only one. So my contract is going to be semicolon, square root, SQRT, colon. My input only needs one number. And then my output is also a number. Okay. Number 23. Here is a new contract for a new function. So we have semicolon, rectangle, colon, number, string, arrow, image. So what is the name of this function? Okay. Keep in mind, the name of the function is in between the semicolon and the colon. So the name of the function is rectangle. Okay. How many inputs are in the domain? So we're just counting here. It's not asking what are they, we're just counting. So my domain is between the semicolon or the colon and the arrow. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4 things between there. So there's 4 pieces in the domain. What is the range? The range is after the arrow. So the range of this is an image. Okay. So what does this code produce? What do we think it's going to produce? Okay. Rectangle 150 solid blue. What if we type that into WeScheme? So if I go into my coding program, over here we have rectangle, oops, caps is on. rectangle, 100, 50, solid, blue. Before I hit enter, what do you guys think this is going to do? Hopefully you were right. Created a blue rectangle. Okay. How about the next one? Rectangle, 30, 30, solid, blue. Oh, look at that. That's a square. Now let's talk about this. So D gave us a blue rectangle. Where 150 are the dimensions. So it was 100 by 50. E, that gave us a blue square. Why do you think it was a square instead of a rectangle? Yep, because these are the same. Okay. All right. Here are a few more functions and their contracts. These functions are used to produce an image. So we have an ellipse, a triangle, and a circle. So notice how depending on the name of the function, the number of inputs changes. So for an ellipse, I need 2 numbers and 2 strings. For a triangle, I need 1 number and 2 strings. And for a circle, I also need 1 number and 2 strings. Okay? This says, what other functions can you discover that produce an image? What inputs are needed for the image to be produced? The only other function that we have right now that produces an image is a rhombus. Okay, and the contract for a rhombus would look like this. So a rhombus needs 2 numbers and 2 strings. And just like above, it produces an image. Okay, so make sure you fully understand how to create a contract, what it does, what things are needed for a contract. And if anyone has any questions, please let me know.